One choice. One moment. One love story. Welcome to When He Chose Her. Enjoy the story. Sometimes the person everyone blames first is the same person who saves the day. The lunch crowd at Sterling House was larger than usual that Friday afternoon. Crystal glasses shimmered beneath warm golden lights. Conversations floated through the air alongside the soft sound of piano music. It was the kind of restaurant where a single bottle of wine could cost more than a month's rent for most people. Evelyn Hart moved carefully between tables, carrying a tray balanced effortlessly on one hand. At 26, she had learned how to disappear into the background while still making every customer feel seen. It was a skill that paid the bills. Nothing more. Or so most people assumed. Across the room sat Graham Sterling, billionaire founder of Sterling Ventures. His tailored navy suit looked flawless. His reputation was even sharper. Business magazines called him brilliant. Competitors called him ruthless. Employees called him intimidating when he wasn't around to hear it. But the only person at the table who seemed completely unimpressed by Graham Sterling was his 8-year-old son. Noah Sterling sat sideways in his chair, swinging his legs and pretending a breadstick was a tiny baseball bat. "Dad, if I hit 3 home runs today, can we get ice cream?" Noah asked. Graham glanced up from an email on his phone. "You have a baseball game tomorrow." "I'm practicing early." Graham almost smiled. "Almost. Then we'll discuss your contract terms later." Noah grinned. "That means yes." A few nearby customers laughed quietly. Noah had inherited his father's confidence without inheriting his seriousness. Evelyn noticed the exchange while refilling water glasses nearby. She smiled briefly before continuing her work. Then something caught her attention. A waiter from another section delivered a complimentary dessert sampler to Graham's table. Noah's eyes immediately locked onto a small chocolate pastry topped with crushed nuts. Evelyn froze. Her gaze sharpened. Earlier that afternoon, she had overheard part of a conversation between Noah and another employee. The boy had mentioned a severe tree nut allergy while joking about how many foods he wasn't allowed to eat. Most people would have forgotten the detail. Evelyn hadn't. She watched as Noah reached for the pastry. The waiter had already walked away. Graham was distracted by a phone call from an investor in Chicago. Noah lifted the dessert toward his mouth. Evelyn's heart skipped. She moved before she could think twice. In 3 quick steps, she crossed the dining room. "Noah, wait," she called. The boy looked up, startled. But momentum had already taken over. Evelyn reached the table and gently knocked the pastry from his hand. The dessert hit the floor. Chocolate splattered across the polished marble. The entire restaurant went silent. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. Graham rose from his chair so quickly it nearly tipped backward. His eyes locked onto the scene. His son looked shocked. The dessert lay destroyed on the floor, and a waitress was standing beside his table with her hand still extended. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Graham asked. His voice was calm. Too calm. The dangerous kind of calm. Evelyn opened her mouth. "Sir, I can explain. You touched my son." Nearby guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Noah looked between them, confused. "Dad, she just..." "Not now, Noah." Graham's jaw tightened. Weeks of pressure from negotiations, deadlines, and nonstop travel seemed to crash into this single moment. "I don't care what explanation you have." That was completely inappropriate. Evelyn felt dozens of eyes on her. Heat rose in her face. "The pastry, enough." His voice cut through the room like a blade. "You're fired." The words landed hard. Several employees froze. A manager standing near the entrance looked horrified. Evelyn stood motionless. For a moment, she considered arguing. She considered telling him exactly why she had acted. But before she could speak, Noah suddenly rubbed at his throat. "Dad?" Graham turned. "What is it?" Noah swallowed. His cheerful expression had vanished. "My throat feels weird." A ripple of concern moved through the room. Evelyn's eyes immediately shifted toward the crushed pastry on the floor. Tiny pieces of chopped walnuts were visible among the chocolate crumbs. Her stomach dropped. The next 60 seconds would change everything. For one long second, nobody moved. The elegant dining room that had been filled with conversation and laughter moments earlier now felt frozen in place. Graham dropped to one knee beside his son. The billionaire who could command boardrooms, negotiate billion-dollar acquisitions, and make markets react with a single decision suddenly looked like every other worried parent in America. "Noah, look at me," he said quietly. "Can you breathe?" Noah nodded, but his small hand remained pressed against his throat. I can breathe. It just feels funny. The manager hurried toward the table. Several employees gathered nearby. Someone reached for a phone. Evelyn stepped forward despite every instinct telling her to walk away. After all, she had already lost her job. But Noah mattered more than her pride. Does he carry an emergency allergy kit? She asked. Graham looked up sharply. What? An allergy kit? An injector? Medication? Anything? Graham stared at her for half a second before understanding hit him. His expression changed. Not completely, but enough. In my briefcase, he said. Black case. Beside the chair. Evelyn was already moving. She retrieved the case, opened it, and found the kit almost immediately. Her hands were steady. Too steady for an ordinary waitress. The manager noticed. So did Graham. How do you know what to look for? He asked. Evelyn handed him the medication. Because he told one of the servers earlier that he has a severe tree nut allergy. Graham looked toward the shattered pastry. Then toward Noah. Then back at Evelyn. Suddenly the pieces began falling into place. The dessert. The panic. The way she had rushed across the room. The way she had knocked it from Noah's hand without hesitation. The silence in the restaurant became heavier. Noah swallowed again. A minute later the discomfort began easing. Color returned to his face. The tension in Graham's shoulders loosened slightly for the first time. A physician who happened to be dining nearby approached the table and checked on Noah. After a brief conversation and a careful examination, the doctor offered a reassuring smile. He seemed stable. Fortunately, he did not consume any significant amount. That was very lucky. Lucky. The word echoed strangely. Graham slowly rose to his feet. He looked down at the crushed pastry. Walnuts were clearly visible among the crumbs. The restaurant manager turned pale. That should never have been served, she whispered. The kitchen allergy notes were supposed to be flagged. Graham barely heard her. His attention remained fixed on Evelyn. 5 minutes earlier, he had publicly fired her in front of a room full of strangers. 5 minutes earlier, he had been absolutely certain he was protecting his son. Now he realized the opposite was true. Noah looked up at Evelyn. You remembered? Evelyn smiled softly. Of course I remembered. Nobody ever remembers. The simple statement landed harder than anyone expected. A few guests nearby lowered their eyes. Graham felt something uncomfortable settle in his chest. Guilt. Real guilt. He was accustomed to solving problems with money, influence, or efficiency. This felt different. This felt personal. Miss Hart, he said finally. Evelyn looked at him. Yes, sir. For the first time since the incident, his voice lost its sharp edge. I owe you an apology. The entire room seemed to lean closer. Graham Sterling was not known for apologizing. Yet there he stood in the center of one of the finest restaurants in the city doing exactly that. I reacted before I understood what happened. Evelyn remained quiet. You protected my son. More silence. Then Noah grinned. I told you she was helping. Graham exhaled. Apparently you did. A few people laughed softly. The tension cracked just enough for the room to breathe again. The manager stepped forward quickly. Evelyn, there has clearly been a misunderstanding. We would be very happy for you to continue working here. Several employees nodded in agreement. Only minutes ago she had been dismissed. Now everyone seemed desperate to reverse the decision. But something unexpected happened. Evelyn looked around the dining room. Then she untied her apron. The movement was calm, gentle, final. She folded it neatly and placed it on the nearest chair. Thank you, she said. But I think my shift is over. Graham frowned slightly. You are leaving? I think that would be best. Noah's smile disappeared immediately. Wait. You cannot leave. Evelyn crouched beside him. I have to. Will I see you again? The question seemed innocent. Yet for some reason it lingered in the air longer than it should have. Evelyn hesitated. Just briefly. Then she smiled. Maybe. Minutes later she walked through the restaurant doors and disappeared into the bright Manhattan afternoon. Graham remained standing near the window, watching the sidewalk long after she was gone. He told himself it was because she had saved his son's life. Nothing more. Yet deep down, something told him this was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The subway ride back to Queens took 43 minutes. Evelyn spent most of it staring out the window as Manhattan slowly disappeared behind tunnels, concrete walls, and flickering station lights. The events of the afternoon replayed in her mind again and again. The silence, the accusation, the apology, the look on Noah's face when she walked away. She shook her head and focused on the familiar rhythm of the train. By the time she reached her neighborhood, the sun was beginning to set. Orange light spilled across brick buildings and narrow sidewalks. It was not glamorous. It was not wealthy, but it was home. As soon as Evelyn opened the door to her small apartment, a 70-pound golden retriever came charging across the room like a furry hurricane. "Biscuit," she laughed as the dog nearly knocked her backward. Biscuit spun in circles, barking happily, completely unaware that his owner had just experienced one of the strangest days of her life. "You always know how to improve a bad day, do you not?" Biscuit responded by stealing one of her shoes and sprinting into the living room. "Give that back." 5 minutes later, Evelyn was chasing him around the couch while he proudly carried the shoe like an Olympic trophy. For the first time all day, she laughed. Really laughed. Meanwhile, 20 miles away, Graham Sterling sat alone in his office on the 46th floor of Sterling Venture's headquarters. The skyline stretched endlessly beyond the glass walls. Normally, views like this calmed him. Tonight, they did not. A file lay open on his desk. It contained quarterly reports worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He had not read a single page. Instead, he found himself staring at a business card from Sterling House Restaurant. "You are still thinking about her," his assistant, Daniel, observed from the doorway. Graham looked up. "Thinking about who?" Daniel raised an eyebrow. "The woman who saved Noah." Graham leaned back in his chair. "I handled the situation poorly." That might be the understatement of the year. Graham almost smiled. "Thank you for your support. You pay me to tell the truth." Daniel paused. "And the truth is that Noah has talked about her 3 times in the last 2 hours." As if summoned by magic, the office door opened again. Noah entered carrying a tablet. "4 times," he corrected. Graham sighed. "Should not you be at home?" "Grandpa dropped me off." Noah climbed into a chair. "Did you find her yet?" "Find who?" "Evelyn." Graham rubbed his temples. "Noah, you should." "Why?" Noah looked genuinely confused by the question. "Because good people are hard to find." The room became unexpectedly quiet. Daniel turned away to hide a smile. Children had a way of saying things adults spent years learning. Graham glanced toward the city lights beyond the windows. Somewhere out there, a woman who owed him absolutely nothing had protected his son without hesitation. She had remembered a detail everyone else overlooked. Then she had walked away when staying would have been easier. That bothered him. Not because she left, because he respected it. Back in Queens, Evelyn sat on her small balcony with a cup of tea. The evening air was cool. Cars moved below. A distant siren echoed somewhere across the city. Biscuit rested beside her feet. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from a former coworker appeared on the screen. "The restaurant manager wants you back. They are offering a raise." Evelyn stared at the message. Then she locked the phone without replying. Money would help. She needed it. But something inside her refused to return. Some doors close for a reason. She looked up at the stars beginning to appear between the city lights. What she did not know was that, at that exact moment, one determined billionaire had already instructed an entire team to find her. And for the first time in years, Graham Sterling was not searching for a business opportunity. He was searching for a person. 3 days later, Evelyn was carrying a tray of coffee mugs through a neighborhood diner in Queens when the bell above the entrance chimed. She barely looked up at first. The lunch rush was in full swing. Construction workers filled one side of the room. Retirees occupied their usual corner booth. Someone was arguing cheerfully about baseball near the window. It was ordinary, comfortable, exactly the way she liked it. Then the conversations began to fade. One customer stopped talking mid-sentence. Another turned toward the door. A waitress beside Evelyn nearly dropped a stack of menus. Curious, Evelyn finally glanced up. Graham Sterling had just walked into the diner. His tailored charcoal suit looked completely out of place among the red vinyl booths and checkered floor tiles. The billionaire paused for a moment, taking in the room. He received the same reaction celebrities usually received, except he seemed completely uninterested in the attention. His eyes searched until they landed on Evelyn. "You have got to be kidding me," she muttered. Graham walked toward her. Half the restaurant watched him. The other half pretended not to. "Miss Hart." Evelyn set down her tray. "Mr. Sterling, may we talk? You spent 3 days searching for me just to ask that question?" A few nearby customers smiled into their coffee cups. Graham looked mildly uncomfortable. "When you say it like that, it sounds excessive." "Because it is excessive." For the first time, She noticed the slightest hint of amusement in his expression. Fair point. The diner owner appeared from the kitchen, nearly tripping over a mop bucket after recognizing the visitor. Mr. Sterling. Welcome. Anything you need is on the house. Actually, Graham replied, never taking his eyes off Evelyn. I am here for her. 3 tables. Immediately stopped eating. Evelyn closed her eyes. Wonderful. By tonight the entire neighborhood would think she was secretly dating a billionaire. 5 minutes, she said. That is all you get. They sat at a small booth near the back. Graham folded his hands. Evelyn crossed her arms. Neither spoke for several seconds. Finally, Graham broke the silence. I would like to apologize again. You already did. Then I would like to apologize better. That caught her off guard. Better. Apparently there are levels to these things. Against her will, Evelyn laughed. Just a little. Graham noticed. There it is. What? The smile. Noah said I should try to make you smile. Evelyn shook her head. Of course he did. Graham reached into his jacket and placed a folder on the table. I have a proposal. Evelyn immediately looked suspicious. That sounds dangerous. It is not. Every billionaire says that before presenting something dangerous. Another reluctant smile escaped her. Graham slid the folder forward. Noah needs someone he trusts. Someone who understands his medical needs and pays attention to details everyone else misses. I would like to hire you as his personal wellness consultant. Evelyn stared at him, then at the folder, then back at him. You are serious. Completely. You want to hire a waitress. I want to hire the woman who noticed something every trained employee overlooked. Evelyn opened the folder. The salary nearly made her choke on air. This is ridiculous. It is competitive. This is more money than I make in a year. Exactly. She pushed the folder back across the table. No, Graham blinked. No. No, you have not even considered it. I considered it. My answer is still no. Graham looked genuinely confused. It was probably a rare experience for him. May I ask why? Evelyn leaned forward. Because the last time I worked for you, I lasted approximately 7 seconds. A man at the next booth laughed so hard he nearly spilled his coffee. Graham rubbed his forehead. I deserve that. Yes, you do. Silence settled between them. Not hostile, just honest. Finally, Graham stood. He picked up the rejected folder. Very well. Evelyn nodded. Very well. He took 2 steps away, then stopped. Noah is going to be disappointed. Evelyn looked down at the table. For the first time, her confidence wavered. Graham noticed immediately. Interesting, he said quietly. What? You said no to me. Correct. You did not say no to Noah. Before she could answer, Graham offered a small smile and walked toward the door. Evelyn watched him leave. Something told her the conversation was not over. Unfortunately, something else told her he knew it too. The following Saturday morning, Evelyn was halfway through walking Biscuit through the neighborhood park when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and immediately frowned. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Almost. Hello. Evelyn. The excited voice nearly exploded through the speaker. Noah, she asked, already recognizing him. You remembered my voice. You are difficult to forget. Noah sounded pleased with himself. Good. Because I need help. Evelyn stopped beside a row of maple trees. What kind of help? I think I am very sick. Her expression changed instantly. What happened? I have not eaten pancakes in almost 6 hours. Silence. Then Biscuit sneezed. Noah. Yes. That is not a medical emergency. It feels like one. She could hear laughter in the background. Adult laughter. Graham's laughter. The realization made her narrow her eyes. Is your father listening to this conversation? Maybe. Put him on the phone. A few seconds later, Graham spoke. Good morning. You are encouraging him. In my defense, he stole my phone before I realized what he was doing. That sounds suspiciously convenient. Graham chuckled. I thought you might say that. Before Evelyn could answer, Noah's voice returned. We are at Central Park. Wonderful. You should come. No, why? Because normal people do not invite themselves into billionaire family outings. You saved my life. Evelyn sighed. It was impossible to argue with the direct honesty of an 8-year-old. I have things to do. Like what? She looked down. Biscuit was currently trying to befriend a squirrel. Honestly, stopping my dog from embarrassing me. Noah gasped. Dramatically. Bring him. 20 minutes later, despite every logical reason not to, Evelyn found herself entering Central Park. Biscuit trotted beside her, tail wagging confidently. She immediately spotted Noah waving from across a grassy field. Graham stood nearby wearing jeans and a navy sweater instead of a business suit. Somehow that surprised her more than it should have. Without the polished corporate armor, he looked less like a billionaire and more like an exhausted father trying his best. "You came," Noah shouted. "Apparently, I made a terrible life decision." Noah laughed and ran over. Biscuit instantly decided Noah was his new favorite human. Within seconds, both of them were racing across the grass, while Evelyn and Graham followed at a much slower pace. For a while, they simply watched. Children flew kites nearby. Cyclists passed along winding paths. The city skyline shimmered beyond the trees. It felt strangely peaceful. "Thank you," Graham said quietly. Evelyn glanced at him. "For what?" "For showing up. I came because Noah called." "Exactly." They walked a few more steps. Then Noah suddenly appeared carrying an ice cream cone nearly the size of his head. "Dad bought me this." "Before lunch?" Evelyn asked. "I am building character." Graham looked completely serious. Noah burst out laughing. So did Evelyn. For a brief moment, all three forgot about awkward first impressions and difficult conversations. They simply enjoyed the afternoon. Later, as the sun drifted lower, Noah sat on a park bench eating the last bite of his ice cream. "You know," he announced, "you two argue like old married people." Graham nearly choked on his coffee. Evelyn stared at the boy. "Where did you hear that expression?" "My teacher." "Remind me to meet your teacher," Graham muttered. Noah grinned. "I am just saying." Evelyn shook her head, but she could not stop smiling. As they prepared to leave, Noah handed her a folded piece of paper. "What is this?" she asked. "Homework." She unfolded it. It was a crayon drawing. Three people stood together beneath a giant tree. A golden dog occupied almost half the page. At the top, written in large, uneven letters, were the words, "My favorite people." Evelyn looked at the picture longer than she intended. Something warm settled quietly in her chest. Across from her, Graham noticed. Neither of them said anything. But for the first time since they met, the distance between them felt just a little smaller. The drawing stayed on Evelyn's refrigerator longer than she expected. Every time she opened the door for milk or leftovers, the crooked letters made her smile. "My favorite people." It was a simple drawing from a child. Yet somehow it felt heavier than expensive gifts or grand gestures. A week passed. Then another. Life settled into an unusual rhythm. Noah called often. Sometimes to ask questions about school. Sometimes to complain about vegetables. Sometimes for no reason at all. Graham never interfered. At least not directly. But every now and then Evelyn would hear his voice somewhere in the background. Usually correcting Noah. Occasionally losing an argument to him. One rainy Thursday evening, Evelyn finished her shift and headed toward the subway station. The sidewalks glistened beneath streetlights. People hurried past carrying umbrellas and takeout bags. She was halfway down the station stairs when she heard someone call her name. "Evelyn." She turned. Graham stood near the entrance holding a black umbrella. Water dripped from the edges. "Do billionaires normally wait outside subway stations?" she asked. "Only on special occasions." "And what occasion is this?" Graham hesitated. That alone caught her attention. Confident men rarely hesitated. "I would like to show you something." 20 minutes later, they sat inside a quiet coffee shop near the river. Rain tapped gently against the windows. Graham placed a thin folder on the table. Evelyn immediately narrowed her eyes. "Another job offer?" "No good. My blood pressure could not handle that." To her surprise, Graham smiled. "Open it." She did. Inside were copies of academic records, scholarships, medical training evaluations, clinical commendations. Evelyn's expression changed instantly. "Where did you get these?" "Public records. University archives. References." "You investigated me. I researched you." "That sounds like the billionaire version of the same thing." Graham accepted the criticism without argument. Evelyn continued reading. Every document came from years earlier, back when she had been one of the highest-ranked students in a pediatric nursing program, back when her future had looked completely different. "You were top of your class," Graham said quietly. "Almost. You received awards. A few. Your professors described you as exceptional." Evelyn closed the folder. The warmth she had felt moments earlier disappeared. "That was a long time ago." Graham studied her face. "What happened?" For several seconds, she said nothing. Rain continued tapping against the glass. Finally, she exhaled. "My mother got sick." Graham remained silent. The treatments were expensive. Insurance covered some of it. Not enough. She stared into her coffee. I started working nights. Then weekends. Then more nights. Eventually classes became impossible. You left school. I left 1 semester before graduation. The words sounded calm, but years of disappointment hid beneath them. Graham looked down at the records. You gave up your future. Evelyn shook her head. No, her voice softened. I chose my mother. The distinction mattered. Graham understood that immediately. Outside, headlights reflected across wet pavement. Inside, neither spoke for a while. Then Graham asked a question so quietly she almost missed it. Do you regret it? Evelyn smiled sadly. Some days. Another pause. But if I could go back, I would make the same choice. Graham looked at her differently after that. Not with pity. Not with admiration alone. Something deeper. Respect. Genuine respect. The kind that cannot be purchased. The kind that must be earned. As they left the coffee shop later that evening, the rain had finally stopped. The city felt cleaner somehow. Brighter. Graham walked her toward the subway entrance. For what it is worth, he said, I think you would have been an incredible nurse. Evelyn laughed softly. That is kind of you. It is not kindness. He met her eyes. It is the truth. For a moment, neither looked away. The noise of the city seemed distant. Then a train rumbled somewhere below. The spell broke. Evelyn smiled and headed down the stairs. Graham remained standing on the sidewalk watching her disappear into the station. And for the first time, he realized he was no longer trying to repay a debt. Somewhere along the way, he had simply started caring. Over the following weeks, Evelyn gradually became a regular presence in Noah's life. What started as occasional phone calls turned into shared afternoons, school events, and simple conversations that none of them wanted to end. Without noticing it, the three of them had begun to feel less like strangers and more like something resembling a family. 2 weeks later, autumn arrived in full color across upstate New York. Golden leaves covered hiking trails. Cool air drifted through the trees. Noah's school had organized a weekend outdoor education trip at a large nature preserve nearly 80 miles north of Manhattan. Parents were invited to attend the afternoon activities. Graham had rearranged an entire board meeting to be there. Noah considered this proof that he was more important than international finance. For once, Graham agreed. The preserve was beautiful. Families explored trails. Children learned about wildlife. Teachers organized games and nature scavenger hunts. Laughter echoed through the forest. Everything felt perfect, until it did not. Shortly after lunch, a light rain began falling. Nothing serious, just enough to send most families toward covered picnic areas. During the confusion, Noah wandered away from his group while chasing a bright red kite that had broken loose from another child. He followed it between trees. Then farther still. By the time he realized he could no longer hear voices, the trail had disappeared. Back at the main camp area, nobody noticed at first. Children were moving everywhere. Parents were gathering belongings. Teachers were checking attendance sheets. Then one teacher looked up. Where is Noah? The question spread like a ripple through the crowd. Graham's stomach tightened immediately. What do you mean, where is Noah? 10 minutes later, the entire preserve was searching. 20 minutes later, the rain intensified. 30 minutes later, Graham could barely think. Volunteers moved through the trails calling Noah's name. Rangers organized search teams. The preserve staff remained calm, but the concern in their eyes was impossible to miss. Graham searched trail after trail. His shoes were soaked. His voice grew hoarse. Every passing minute felt heavier than the last. Then his phone rang. Evelyn, he answered immediately. What happened? Her voice sounded sharp with concern. Graham explained as quickly as possible. Silence followed. Then only one sentence. I am coming. 2 hours later, Evelyn arrived at the preserve. She had driven straight from work without stopping. The rain continued falling steadily. Most people would have stayed near the command center. Evelyn did the opposite. She borrowed a trail map and studied it carefully. Then she looked beyond the marked routes. What are you thinking? Graham asked. Noah likes helping people. Yes. He likes rescuing animals. Yes. And he always follows anything that looks interesting. Graham frowned. Definitely yes. Evelyn pointed toward a less traveled section of the preserve near a small observation ridge. Then that is where I would start. Without hesitation, she headed into the woods. Graham followed. The trail narrowed quickly. Rain dripped from branches overhead. Fallen leaves covered the ground. Every sound seemed amplified by the silence between them. As they walked, Evelyn called Noah's name again and again. Not loudly, not desperately, calmly, steadily, the way someone speaks when they want a frightened child to feel safe. Nearly an hour passed. The light began fading. Graham's fear grew heavier with every step. Then Evelyn stopped. Wait. Graham froze. What? She pointed toward the mud beside the trail. Small footprints. Fresh ones. His heart jumped. They followed the tracks uphill toward the observation ridge. The rain softened. The forest grew quieter. Then, faintly, they heard a voice. Hello. Graham's breath caught. Noah. Dad. Relief hit him so suddenly he almost stumbled. The voice came again. Closer now. Dad, I am over here. Evelyn moved first, pushing through a cluster of low branches. Seconds later she found him, sitting beneath a covered wooden observation shelter near the ridge. Noah looked tired, wet, frightened, but completely safe. The moment he saw them, his face lit up. Evelyn. Somehow, despite everything, she was the first person he ran toward. Graham laughed and nearly cried at the same time. For the second time in his life, the woman standing beside him had found his son when nobody else could. For several seconds nobody moved. Rain dripped softly from the roof of the observation shelter. The distant sounds of search teams echoed through the trees. Yet all Graham could focus on was his son standing safely in front of him. Noah wrapped his arms around Evelyn first, then around his father. Graham dropped to one knee and pulled him close. The relief was so overwhelming that he could not find the right words. He simply held on. I am sorry, Noah whispered. I was following the kite. Graham laughed shakily. Of course you were. Then I got lost. I noticed. Noah looked down. Are you mad? Graham placed a hand on his shoulder. No. I am grateful. It was the honest answer. Nearby, members of the search team finally arrived. Teachers, park rangers, and volunteers emerged from the trees, carrying flashlights and rain jackets. The tension that had gripped everyone for hours immediately dissolved. Smiles appeared. Several people applauded softly. One teacher wiped away tears. Another hugged Noah, so tightly he protested that he could still breathe perfectly fine. The walk back to the main camp area felt completely different from the search. Earlier, every trail had seemed endless. Now each step felt lighter. Noah walked between Graham and Evelyn, holding one hand from each of them. At one point he looked up and smiled. This is nice. Neither adult replied. Neither let go either. When they finally reached the command center, dozens of worried parents and staff members gathered around. Questions came from every direction. Was Noah okay? Was he hurt? Had he eaten? Was he cold? Noah answered most of them himself. I was fine. I was not scared. Okay, maybe a little scared. But Evelyn found me. Every answer somehow returned to the same conclusion. Evelyn found me. Graham watched the reactions carefully. The more people spoke, the clearer the truth became. Search teams had covered large sections of the preserve. Rangers had years of experience. Volunteers had worked tirelessly. Yet the person who ultimately found Noah was the same woman who had saved him months earlier in a crowded restaurant. Not because she had special equipment. Not because she had authority. Because she paid attention. Because she cared. Because she never stopped looking. As evening settled over the preserve, families slowly began heading home. The rain finally ended. Soft golden light broke through the clouds. Graham stood beside the parking area watching the sunset reflect across the wet pavement. Evelyn prepared to leave quietly, just as she always did after helping someone. Before she could reach her car, Graham called her name. She turned. For a moment neither spoke. Then something unexpected happened. In front of teachers, parents, staff members, and complete strangers, Graham Sterling stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her in a brief but heartfelt embrace. The crowd fell silent. Graham rarely displayed emotion publicly. Most people considered him composed to a fault. Yet there was nothing controlled about his voice when he finally spoke. Thank you. 2 simple words. But everyone understood they carried far more weight than that. His eyes glistened slightly. You found him. Evelyn smiled gently. Of course I did. Graham shook his head. You always do. The silence that followed felt different. Warm. Honest. A few parents exchanged knowing glances. One teacher smiled openly. Noah noticed all of it. Finally, he muttered. Graham looked down. Finally what? Noah grinned. Nothing. The smile on his face suggested exactly the opposite. As the last cars pulled away from the preserve, Graham stood watching Evelyn walk toward her vehicle. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and orange behind her. He thought about the restaurant, the apology, the park, the coffee shop, the search. Piece by piece, she had changed something inside him without ever trying. Success had taught him how to build companies. Loss had taught him how to endure. But Evelyn Hart was teaching him something entirely different. How to trust, how to slow down, how to see people instead of positions. And as he watched her drive away beneath the fading evening light, Graham realized one truth he could no longer ignore. The most important person to enter his life that year had arrived wearing a waitress uniform. After that day, something changed. Their conversations became longer. Their friendship became routine. Phone calls turned into dinners. Dinners turned into traditions. And before any of them realized it, they had become part of one another's daily lives. Winter arrived quietly. The city exchanged golden leaves for silver mornings. Store windows filled with holiday lights. People hurried through Manhattan wrapped in scarves and thick coats. Life moved forward, as it always did. Yet some changes remained. 3 months after the day at the nature preserve, Evelyn stood outside a large university building holding an acceptance packet in her hands. She read the letter 3 times before fully believing it. She had been accepted into a special completion program that would allow her to finish the final semester of her nursing degree. The dream she thought had disappeared years ago was suddenly within reach again. She should have felt overwhelmed. Instead, she felt grateful. Not because someone had rescued her, because someone had believed in her before she believed in herself. Across town, Noah considered himself entirely responsible for this outcome. "I am basically a life coach now," he announced during dinner one evening. Graham nearly laughed into his coffee. "You are 9 years old." "Exactly. Young vision. Fresh ideas." Evelyn shook her head. "Where does he get this?" "Unfortunately," Graham replied, "I think that one is from me." The months that followed felt different from anything either adult had expected. There was no dramatic declaration, no grand gesture, just small moments, honest moments. Graham attended Evelyn's first day back at school because Noah insisted it was a historic event. Evelyn helped Noah prepare for a science competition and somehow managed to stop him from building a volcano. Inside the living room, Graham learned that success felt far less impressive when nobody was there to share it with. Evelyn learned that accepting help was not weakness. Slowly, naturally, they became part of one another's lives. Then came graduation day. Bright spring sunlight filled the university courtyard. Families gathered with flowers and cameras. Proud parents filled rows of seats. Students in graduation gowns smiled through nervous excitement. Evelyn stood among them holding her cap in one hand. For a moment, she closed her eyes. Years ago, she had believed this day would never come. Yet here she was. When her name was announced, applause echoed across the courtyard. She accepted her diploma with tears shining in her eyes. Not tears of sadness, tears of relief, of accomplishment, of gratitude. After the ceremony ended, she searched the crowd. She found them immediately. Noah was waving both arms like an airport runway signalman. Graham stood beside him holding a bouquet of flowers. The sight made her smile. Noah reached her first. "You did it." "I did. I knew you would." "Of course you did." He handed her a small wrapped box. Inside was the crayon drawing from months earlier, the same one that had lived on her refrigerator. Only now it sat inside a simple wooden frame. "My favorite people." Evelyn felt her throat tighten. "Noah, wait," he said. "That is not the main gift." Before she could ask what he meant, the boy grabbed both her hand and Graham's hand. Then he pushed them together. "There." Graham blinked. "There what?" "Problem solved." "What problem?" Noah rolled his eyes dramatically. "The problem where 2 adults take forever to figure out obvious things." Evelyn laughed. Graham looked helplessly toward the sky. "I cannot believe this is happening." "It is happening," Noah said proudly. "You are welcome." The 3 of them stood there laughing. Then Noah suddenly remembered he had spotted a dessert table across the courtyard and disappeared at remarkable speed, leaving the 2 adults alone. For the first time in a long time, silence settled comfortably between them. Graham looked at Evelyn, really looked at her. The woman who had protected his son, challenged him, inspired him, changed him. "Do you remember the first day we met?" he asked. Evelyn smiled. Unfortunately, yes. I was awful. You were impressive in all the wrong ways. Graham laughed. Then his expression softened. The day I thought I was losing something important, I was actually finding it. Evelyn's smile faded into something gentler, more vulnerable. What do you mean? Graham took a breath. For months, I thought the most valuable thing you saved was Noah. He shook his head slowly. I was wrong. Evelyn's heart skipped. Graham stepped closer. The most valuable thing you saved was me. For a moment, the busy courtyard disappeared. The noise faded. The world narrowed to one quiet conversation. Then Evelyn smiled the same smile that had first caught his attention months ago. You know, she said softly, for a billionaire, you took a very long time to figure that out. Graham laughed. Then she kissed his cheek. Simple, warm, honest. Behind them came a loud shout. Finally, Noah stood near the dessert table holding 2 cupcakes and celebrating like his favorite team had just won a championship. People nearby laughed. So did Evelyn. So did Graham. And as the afternoon sun painted the courtyard gold, all 3 walked forward together. Sometimes the quietest people change everything. Not because they ask for attention, but because they choose kindness when nobody is watching. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share this video, and let us know where you are watching from, and subscribe to When He Chose Her channel. Your support helps us create more emotional stories about kindness, second chances, unexpected love, and the quiet heroes who change lives forever. Let us know your favorite moment in the comments. And do not forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a new story from When He Chose Her.